Okay, good evening and welcome to the webinar on youth engagement in flood risk management, an initiative by Sphere India to engage the youth in DRR conversation for the resilient India. Someone rightly said, in our endeavor to build resilience, the younger generation not only needs to participate, but lead. This is the whole purpose of organizing this event. As you all know, floods in India are turning more severe and unpredictable. In 2020 alone, India suffered losses in the volume of 20,000 crore due to floods. Floods are negatively impacting the overall development of the most vulnerable communities all over the India. And on the other side, what we see, India's population is among the youngest in an aging world. Youth is at the heart of building resilient society. When empowered, young people can build resilience, and their capacity will help the community to cope the disaster well. This is the whole purpose of this webinar. Before we start, I just want to give you a brief introduction about the Spheres India Academic Initiative. It was launched on 10th of April 2020, a collaborative initiative of WHO, UNICEF, WFP, HCLF, Sphere India, and other organizations. The Sphere India Academy is a capacity building initiative with a mission to enable humanitarian aid and frontline workers across India to fulfill various roles in emergency preparedness and response and support local government. A range of technical sessions covering diverse topics are being delivered on a regular basis using the online platform just like this. In the past 2 years, we conducted 270 academic sessions through the COVID-19 Academy, which saw around 1.5 lakh participants and 684 unique resource persons who delivered these sessions. To begin with this webinar, I invite Ms. Kusum, Chairperson, Global Water Partnership, South Asia. Ms. Kusum from Sri Lanka is the chair of the Network of Women Professionals, founder member of the Sri Lanka Water Partnership, or Lanka Jalani, and the 2012 recipient of the prestigious Women in Water Award from the London-based International Water Association. She was awarded in the recognition of her long association with and deep commitment to gender-related issues in water. Over to you, Ms. Kusum.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Nitish. And I can tell you, I'm a water person, but today is one of those days that I think there's far too much of water. I think we are all getting about 100 millimeters. Probably Sri Lanka is going to get much more. So I would like to start off by saying that water is the casualty of climate change. And as much as the millions of people who are suffering is also the casualties of water. Let's look a little bit. I'm supposed to talk on adolescent women and girls, but let me go back to the global accords, which frame the work that we are. Hello? Am I?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, yes.
Okay. I might have to knock off the video because I'm having, if I'm not audible. Okay. If you look at the global accords, which give us very clear guidelines on women, on disasters, I think let's go to the Sendai framework, which again, like the SDGs, is due for closure in 2030. It says very clearly that disaster risk reduction calls all society engagement and partnership. Okay, question mark as we go along. Where are the women and youth? It also requires empowerment and inclusive, accessible, and non-discriminatory participation. Again, go back to those two words. A gender, age, and disability and cultural perspective should be integrated to all the policies and practice, and women and youth leadership should be promoted. In this context, we have to give special attention to the voluntary work of organized citizens. On women, we are talking again and saying women and their participation are critical to effectively managing disaster risk and designing blah, 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 as well as build their capacity to secure alternate means of livelihood in post-disaster situations. Now, why am I saying blah, blah, blah? Because I have heard this for 25 years about women. And we are still talking about that. we say that children and women the youth are the agents of change. They should be given space and modalities to contribute to risk reduction according to legislation, national practice, and educational curricula. Again, what my first statement is, disasters are usually natural. There is always a factor which is anthropogenic, which is caused by people. Those people are men and women. Those victims are men, women, and youth. But the people, the perpetrators, if I would want to call it that way, are not always women and youth, because they are the ones who have the least amount of decision making in many of the activities which relate to this disaster risk reduction. They are not decision makers, but they are victims. The second is that there is I'd like to throw these words, reactive and proactive. Now, we talk about resilience building being very important, very essential, but reactive in the sense that resilience building is something which should happen before the event. But very often in our countries, I know it is definitely in my country, a disaster is something you respond to. You have a flood, you go with people, taking food, you try to bring them out in boats. You have a landslide, you go and try to dig them out. But do you do what is needed before the event? If I can go to the landslide, which is supposed to be the worst landslide in Sri Lanka, at the Samasarakanda Aranayaka, at least 3 months before, we saw that there is a possible of a major slippage before if we have bad rains. Finally, we had 5 days of 100 millimeters and the mountain came down, killing something like 127 people. These are avoidable disasters because that was preceded by uncontrolled logging, illicit logging, I would say. So, is this a natural disaster if you take down an entire mountain by taking away all the tree cover? Or is it a man-made disaster? These are questions that we need to ask for men and women. Again, remember that the women and youth are the ones who would least contribute to decision-making related to conservation of catchments. About women, we are still struggling to operationalize the third Dublin Rio principle, which was in the Dublin Rio summit. That was, I think it was 1975. But we are still talking about gender equality. We are still talking about getting women organized. We are still having the situation where we are struggling to get women into decision making. Women's roles, women's their needs, women's especially priorities related to children are all somewhere as a also ran. I must say we are much better off now than maybe 25 years ago. But what I see is there is the tokenism that we have always seen about women is now being followed by a tokenism about youth. We put a young person there and say, okay, we got the youth thing. Is that what we mean? Is that what we need? Or do we need to involve them in the decision making? So this tokenism is, again, when I see what young people do related to disasters, I think that, I say that they are providing, please don't be offended, they are providing the hard labor for doing beach cleanups, digging holes for reforestation, elimination of invasive species, cleaning up the plastic, the hard labor. But is this the role of youth? I think we need to really, reflect on whether this is the role of youth that we would envisage in a disaster resilient country. Again, when you have youth protesting and we have youth who are demanding, very often the response is tear gas and water cannons, as it has happened so many times in my country recently. Now, is this that I feel that, you said that, India has a large component of young people and many of our countries are the same. can we not utilize this strength, this energy in a much more profitable manner to the country? Can we not, not push youth to the point of protest, but to get them involved at each level, whether it is a panchayat level, whether it is a different level. I'm sorry, I don't quite remember your different stages of local government, but that is something that we could really think of. The other is the silo thinking. I'm glad that one of the presenters is going to talk about traditional values and culture. But I do believe that it is important as South Asians, as Asians, to look at culture related to water, but also culture related to our social networks. We are a people who support the thinking of value of seniors. We value seniors. We are trained to value and respect seniors. But sometimes this respect for seniority goes beyond the needs of the youth, because it is not enough only to be respectful of seniors. Seniors must also learn to engage with the youth. That it is not enough to say, look, you young guys, you chota fellows, shut up and wait. No, we have to make sure that these people, because you come with a different, youth and I are not in the same age group, but you come with certain strengths which the older people will not have. So why don't we get together our complementary skills? Old people, especially those in the traditional villages, in the traditional communities, have a long sense of understanding what a community is like, where a disaster can happen, where this activity that, the anthropogenic activities that we undertake can end up in a crisis. So that is another issue that I would like you to think. And then I would like you to reflect on who are the players, because according to the players, we need to undertake a different kinds of advocacy, a different modality of decision making. We have players who are agencies, state agencies, and we have private sector. We have community groups and we have citizens. So these four groups have to come together if we are going to have some kind of a integrated approach to disaster risk resilience. But there are different ways that we should access them, integrate their strengths, but also give them the thinking. This is not a natural disasters that we are thinking of, and it affects women and children and youth in different ways. Again, when you're unlocking the potential of women and youth, the two words I'd like to use is incremental and intermittent. We have to make sure that this distinction is carefully woven into our planning, our decision making, and our policies. Unfortunately, we only think of a disaster when the flood comes. And then we ask, where are the boats? Or, where are the food parcels? No, I think we need to do very serious pre-planning, because last year I did a large numbers of activities related to flood. And I would like to call it the year of flood. But the way that we are going, this year might be a worse year. So, do we have the structures to engage youth in a productive way and not as tokens? Do we have the policies which will support those structures? Do we have a mindset within our societies, our cultures, which will then give us the strong foundation for this activity? If am I almost done? 15 minutes? No? Okay. I would then maybe like to share a small, okay, these are stories. The story is, that in the Asian culture and in the South Asian culture, there is something which people say, evil eye and evil talk. Does it resonate with you? Okay. Now, when I went to this place which this very terrible disaster happened, the landslide, about 3 months before, and I warned them, look, if you don't do something about your deforestation, we have a problem, especially when it comes with this climate change related extreme events, which we are having more and more. Well, nothing happened. The mountain came down. And when, when I went the next time, they said, you know, that is a case of evil mouth. So it's my evil mouth and not their deforestation which led to this issue. So I think we also need to look at disasters through the angle of culture. And culture comes very close with religion. Religion is something that we are not effectively engaging in the South Asian arena, because if we want to get people organized, if we want to get people engaged, networking is very easy through religious groups. Globally, I must say it has been taken up a little more at this point. Now, if we can have faith-based organizations engaged as catalysts within a community, especially within a community which is very conservative, or a community where women and girls are not allowed to interact openly, I think that may be a very good way of doing advocacy for especially for women and youth. And these faith-based organizations already have structures, they have networks, but they are the ones who seem to be least engaged in the proactive response of building disaster resilience. They are very much engaged in the response to a disaster. So can we push that boundary a little bit more and then try and make them much more stronger catalysts in supporting women and youth, engaging youth in becoming the change agents that we want them to be. So let's try and see whether the activities which you are undertaking, I believe that you are doing something absolutely important, because nobody can watch BBC without seeing floods in India. Floods everywhere. You'll very soon see floods in Sri Lanka as well. So I really appreciate what you're doing. But as youth, number one is seniors have to accept you, and you have to be integrated into the networks, existing networks, to become more powerful agents of change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. And I know you have lots of knowledge and experience to share with us. I just want to respond to one or two the issue what you raised. One is about engaging the faith leaders in the disaster preparedness. So I like to share about the initiative by Sphere India, which tried. There's a Sphere India initiated one interfaith humanitarian platform, which is trying the same way what you suggested. And this initiative is going on for almost like more than 1 year. And we are having consultation at the state-wise, national level, and then trying to engage them to spread the message of disaster preparedness. The second, I really like your idea about, for youth engagement, we need to have a structure, policies, and as well as the mindset, because we can't do with just with the youth tokenism, just like you just invite them and just market take like we engage the youth. So thank you very much, and I hope you will stay. So like now all the participants can ask you a lot of questions at the end of all this, like, once the speakers complete their sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nitish. I will stay if the power stays, because we are having intermittent power cuts and it's
that's
raining.
fine,
it's more than 100 millimeters already.
That's fine, ma'am. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now we have today with us Mr. Andrew. He's a manager, disaster risk reduction, humanitarian and emergency affairs from World Vision India. He has more than 20 years of experience working in the development sector. And today he will be speaking on protecting the vulnerable children and youth during the floods. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nitish, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Sphere India came up with this initiative, and it's been a good initiative. It's been going on for the last couple of years, and it's been a very good initiative for people to learn, relearn, unlearn, and also use it for their development practice in the forerun of, because COVID was one thing that has disturbed some of the things, but this learning platform was a good initiative. That's what I would like to acknowledge Spear India for this. Going ahead with our topic for the day, as Madam who said, Kusum Madam said about the examples from Sri Lanka, it's India also is vulnerable to floods in many ways. Recently, last couple of weeks, because I stay in the eastern part of India from West Bengal, even though I'm from the southern part of India. But when we see the northeast part of India, Assam has been badly damaged because of the floods in the recent couple of weeks. And we are trying to see that how we could be in a position to help those vulnerable communities there. And preferably when we just see the fate of children, women, people who are old age, these are the communities who have been, because the total community is affected, but the vulnerable part of the community is badly affected. And children are bound to this vulnerability, and they go to a lot of stress, lot of issues. The impact is more in their mental health. That's what I would like to bring to the notice. I have a small presentation, I would like to share that. Just. Okay, this is about disaster impact on children. There's about 10 slides. Then after that, there are some points we will just discuss about how to just prepare them. That is very, very much important. When we see the children are directly affected by disasters, they are very much directly affected. They lose the loss of life for children has been higher than the adults. When we just, because this gets missed in our total statistics. The media reports on the total number of people who are affected, people who lost their lives, but then they don't bring this. Some media doesn't bring this particular numbers for people for discussion, and there is a lot of ignorance also. Disasters also separate children from their families, damages the critical infrastructure where children are more related with. Children's survival becomes a question, and that becomes fatal for them as they go through. Disasters also, how do they, their normalcy get disturbed. These are some of the things, their refreshment, the eating habits get disturbed, the school going, their activity on a day-to-day basis get disturbed. Then they go through this psychological and physical damage, effects on health. Children's health may be very more vulnerable in the disaster, and biophysical reasons. Disaster can damage the children's physical health. I'm putting this in the context of disasters rather than going more into the flood part, because this is more or less the same when it relates to the flood or any other hazard that can be a major impact on them. So children may be injured or killed, reduced intake of calories because food intake becomes less. Their vitamin essential nutrients also becomes a lot of problematic during that disaster that they go through. They experience a lot of this. Disaster can cut the access of medical care, destroy the health infrastructure. It can lead to illnesses and injuries, which can cause, because doctors may not turn up, health facilities cannot be properly working. Non-disaster related health problems can also be may go untreated. Then malnutrition becomes a disruption because of the food supply. If malnutrition happens, that can also lead to many other uh, impact in the age group of the children. Their the mental development can be a damage. Then the physical, then also their emotional issues can also lead to many other impacts. Uh, Children's health indicators, how it gets impacted. Their stunting, uh, it goes through a failure. Then their underweight, uh, they go through this underweight issues. Then wasting, measured weight and height scores can come down, uh, caused by, because this is decrease in food supply. Their proper nutrition level, consumption of food is not properly, uh, they cannot find proper food for them. Parents may not be in a position to, that the vulnerable children go through. Once this affects the children, the teens also face this. See, if in a family of uh, three or four, priority can be less, but more priority for the teens, that becomes a challenge. That becomes an impact on the children, because we group children from the age of uh, 1 to the age of children are considered to be that, and this is the age where their impact is more. We could see this, how a malnutrition can lead children if they are malnourished. They go through this disaster impact, and they are still pushed into that situation. Their impact is more. Uh, Water sanitation issues, also unhygienic conditions, lack of safe drinking water for them. Then infectious diseases can spread during floods and cause of diarrhea, cholera. If a child is already malnourished, they can this can push them, and the impact is more. Then diarrheal illness can lead to dehydration and malnourishment. Dehydration can become a threatening for babies and young children. This is the vulnerability that we are focusing on. Then, when it comes to education, loss of school infrastructure due to disaster, loss of school learning material due to disaster, loss of school time and closure. We could have seen this, experienced this in the last couple of years when the schools were closed, and many children who did not have access to proper education, they went to uh, menial labors also. Recently, in the last to last month, I was in Maharashtra in a place called Aurangabad. There I was. We started a new project there, and I was just visiting some of the communities. There, brick kilns were the main business, which is with the community started since 2019. Uh, COVID COVID came into existence in 2020. And children did not have access to schools. Schools were closed. Teachers were not coming. Teachers were in a different situation. Teachers were from the outside districts. They couldn't turn up, and schools were closed. But children who are from the villages, they started because the families couldn't afford the proper food for them. Children were pushed in a 6 months time. Children started working as bricklayer workers. So that is how the vulnerable situation can push them to that level of vulnerability, and they can go. The impact is more upon them, and they can also be victims to road injury, accidents, loss of recreational activities. Effects the event itself stressful and frightening. Natural disasters can also cause emotional harmness for the children. After disaster, stress can be incurred from damages of children's home, like their normalcy get disturbed. They are pushed into a relief camp. There also the supplies are not for them to they go through this challenge. Okay, in when it comes to the flood, like this is a normal situation that, but I have some things I have like three areas that we need to cover when it comes to the flood, how children and teens are affected. They because in Bihar floods and West Bengal floods, Assam floods, what we normally they say that, sir, our books have been lost. We are not able to go to school. School is not in a position to just give us the books. And this became a very big challenge for them. This I have been hearing for many disasters that has come and gone. But before the flood, what they need to do, how they need to prepare it, because these are very critical, and these are some of the advices that we need to spend time with equipping the children and teens, because they are vulnerable situation is on a very high scale. Talk to them about the floods. Spend time with the family. Discuss them. School is a platform wherein children are equipped. School safety what happen, how do they need to prepare for that, because as long as we don't bring this in the context of the child, in the context of a group of children, in the context of the teens, they are not able to get the proper message. Talk to them. We need to just prepare them. We need to provide some way or other this message has to go to them. Secondly, stay informed. How could children be informed about? Because these are all the hard topics that we have in a present for the present generation. These are all because when we were growing up, nobody thought us about climate change effect. Nobody thought us about. There were very few people talking about environment, biodiversity, or we shouldn't cut the forest, we shouldn't cut the jungles. There were very few people, but now the situation has turned around in the last 35 years. This has been a hot topic in our present context. My children, because since we are involved in this work, they are already learning how to just do those things. Yesterday, I was for this small talk. Can I give some suggestions? I said, yes, you can. So that's how the children we need to involve them. We need to bring them to that floor, a platform where they could learn and also do things which can be because for when they grow, that becomes a habit for them. Thirdly, follow the guidance of the local authorities. Like when elders, when adults do that, children need to understand. Because once we don't bring that message, what the local authority do, or how they could identify in their community, because the pockets are very small and large also in a village, in a city, which are the areas which can be flooded, what they could do immediately before the floods, what are the preparative mechanisms that they could understand at the household level, because this is going to be at the two levels. One is at the household level preparation, one is at the community level preparation. How children could get involved, guidance, follow the guidance of the local authority, move to the higher ground, because if children don't pack their materials, like we were talking to a group of children in Bihar, in some of the districts where there is recurrence of flood is more. We used to provide them some sort of preparation wherein they could safeguard their documents, they could safeguard their materials, which are very dear to them. So that was a training that was given to them, because the recurrence of flood is every year then. So in the next year, when we just went and did a research, we could find a mark, like many of them were able to safeguard their materials. So that's how their habituality towards the preparation gets increased. Then, because participation is one thing that we couldn't stop, we shouldn't stop. Ma'am also said the same thing, like how we could involve the gender possibility, because here also in children's area also gender plays a very critical role. How are girls, because each one has a different understanding, their needs are different. Boys has a different needs, girls have a different needs, but even though they are in the same age, their needs and wants are entirely different. So bring them to that situation where they could analyze it, where they could raise their voice in such a way that they could be involved in this preparatory mechanisms. Then some of the children, some of the examples that we could see in different contexts, talk to them about that, provide them support in such a way that they could involve themselves. Nidesh, it is okay. I'm barging on the time.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
1 or 2 minutes.
Okay. Lastly, I would like to bring this don't limit the children's participation in this disaster preparedness, because DRR, child-centered, let it be a child-centered one, because when we work with the children, it is focusing on the children, and let it be on the centered around the children's development, because development and preparedness has to go hand in hand. We cannot do it in silos. It has to be on a parallel level of working. That's what I would like to bring it today for the learning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. What you shared with your session is like how the floods are negatively affecting not the present generation, but the future generation as well. And the demographic dividend, which we are India trying to reap very hard, it will not prepare well for the flood. It will be, it is going to be in vain. The second point I really like is the culture of preparedness at household level. You know, we can't go at very broader level. It should be start at household level. And yes, there should be always a need for the children-centered DRR. So because we can't do it in the silos, it should be always inclusive. Try to include everyone, leave no one behind. So thank you, sir. I hope you have some time to stay at the end to answer some of the participants. And I also request all the participants, if you have any questions, just write it down in the chat box. So in the last, we will know whom to ask which questions. Thank you. So moving on, I now invite Ms. Aradhna Mukhan, PhD scholar from IIT Guwahati. She worked as a young professional at Land and Water Resources Center for Climate Change in National Institute of Disaster Management. She has completed her master's in disaster management from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Her experience extends from research, policy making, advocacy, climate financing, and capacity building. Over to you, Aradhna.
Thank you so much, Nitish, for the warm introduction. I request you to kindly share my presentation, please. Is it full screen?
Have in PDF.
Okay.
That's why.
Yeah.
Yes, it is full.
Okay. Firstly, I would like to thank Spear India for providing me this platform and opportunity to speak on using traditional and local knowledge in flood risk management. Due to time constraint, I'll be skipping the first 2 slides. So if we could go to the third slide, which is about the Marjorie Island. Yeah. So these are very generic. Yeah, just the Marjorie Island. So, because the entire session is on flood management, so let us have a look at Marjorie Island. So, Marjorie Island is one of the biggest river island in Asia, but now, due to gradual erosion and annual flood, it is very, very questionable. The interesting phenomena about this river island is that the local community is very, very welcoming to floods. Okay, they actually want floods to occur in that area. So with the flood, the fertility comes in, where the people are actually able to grow their crops, in a better manner and also have a very fertile land. Thus, the phenomena is described as dancing with the water. Now the question arises, if flood is so good, then what is the problem? The very community that used to celebrate flood is now scared of it. We also see that there is also a very huge loss of life and livelihood. The local people residing in this area have actually stated their grievances, that the rain, in very initial phase, the rain would come at the correct time, and then it also used to go away. But it never used to rain longer than required or for a very prolonged duration. But now the major issue is that the annual floods are no longer just a natural phenomena. So instead, it has totally taken a turn of a catastrophic event occurring at a very frequent rate. And yet, it is beyond the coping capacity of community, and they are not able to deal with it on their own. Thus, collectively, it leads to major loss of life, livelihood, and property. So, there are precautionary measures, due to which the loss of life, at least the loss of life, has definitely gone down. But on the hindsight, there is still a major loss of wildlife, biodiversity, chunks of land are being eroded, because the communities are totally dependent on these agricultural lands. And adding to that, climate change, in this situation, the entire catastrophic flood has escalated. Thus, the question arises on how do we bring back the phenomena of dancing with water back, especially the community residing in the river island who used to look forward to the flood. They are actually now scared of it and are constantly thinking about rehabilitation to a safer zone, to a safer place where less of a flood will occur. Yeah, next slide, please. So since we are emphasizing on the word vulnerability, we all are very well aware, of the impact of climate change. So it is important to understand the relationship between climate change and vulnerability. In this slide, I'll just be providing a gist of how IPCC had gradually inculcated the idea of vulnerability and climate change. If you have a look at the pre-IPCC report, that is before 2007, the focus was drawn towards hazard and impact assessment, where they tried to see how much changes happened and what would be the impact on different sectors. And after understanding the impact of various adaptation measures in order to overcome those challenges. The major gap or limitation was that there was not much involvement of social scientists in these kind of models. Gradually, in the year 2007, the focus was brought on vulnerability. Now, vulnerability, became very important because the whole idea was that, if you can reduce vulnerability, if vulnerability is reduced, which is exposure, then we can also reduce the sensitivity and enhance the adaptive capacity. We will be able to reduce vulnerability, which means that even hazard, even if there's a hazard or any kind of hazard occurs, such as flood, the harm or the impact of the intensity would be comparatively less. Now, the gap or the limitation in this report was that, when we talk about the word exposure or even reducing exposure, how it is done. Not everything can be spoken about rehabilitation or rehabilitating the entire community. And moreover, how it is defined as sensitivity? How do you reduce sensitivity? For example, a very simple basic example, your friend may be sensitive to dust and certain kind of allergies, and you may not be. So that kind of change needs to be addressed, and also enhancing the coping capacity or mechanism to adapt with These were the major limitations. And gradually, in 2014, the focus was entirely shifted to something called risk framework, um, where it defined climate change as climate risk, where climate change increases the risk to reduce the risk by understanding variability, ensuring, by understanding hazard and reducing exposure, where vulnerability becomes an independent component. Now, the sensitivity and adaptation, they no longer are a function of vulnerability. So the risk is at the center, which is the impact, and then the vulnerability, exposure, and hazard. These three components are independent. So if one wants to reduce vulnerability of the hazard, for example, flood, if the community wants to reduce it, then the entire focus or attention can be drawn to vulnerability itself rather than reducing hazard and exposure. Because if we focus on hazard and exposure, then those are long-term goals, where you need to rehabilitate the entire community and also relocate them in such area, where they are not exposed to any kind of sensitivity or hazard of any kind. So moving ahead, the next slide, please. Yeah, so let's have a look at flood management. So in very simple language, flood management can be segregated into two types, which is structural and non-structural. So to mitigate, the flood, the kind of measure we take, or the kind of measures we have been taking so far, is very, very structural. Now, I'm not saying that the structural measure is not required. The structural measure is very, very important. It is vital to take engineered solution into consideration, because disasters are inevitable, and we have been focusing much on the structural measures. So the question arises, what about the non-structural measures? Are we providing enough resources? Are we looking through the lens of interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary aspects? Are we engaging enough stakeholders? Or are we focusing on social, and also sustainable solutions? It could be related with early warning system, mental health issues, social and behavioral change communication, and also utilizing the use of indigenous knowledges and practices. Next slide, please. So since the title of the presentation also deals with indigenous knowledges and practices, so I will be highlighting few of the knowledge and traditional, methods which were adapted by the African culture. So starting with early prediction of flood and rain based on ethology, that is animal behavior. So in the morning, of the very last day of Academic month, which is the Posh, it comes between mid of January, that is the eve of the local crop harvest, which is also, the festival Assam. If the cattle are found to, stay standing under the shed, that also indicates a forthcoming flood. Second, if the cattle behaves very abnormally, and furious when they are bought, for bath during the morning of this bihu, then even, this kind of animal behavior is also believed for a prediction of flood. Whereas if you have if you are living in that area, and of course you are aware of the geographical location, then you will also see the behavior of the insects. For example, locusts and grasshoppers, come from the head and fly randomly and enter houses. Even this situation, this sudden change in behavior or the sudden change in the weather conditions also inclines towards a flood, with heavy rain. Also, ants shift their shelters to higher places where the eggs and the food stuff, is kept. It also indicates forthcoming flood, and it could be other indicators such as fox, if howls irritably at higher places, it indicates a forthcoming prolonged fire season. And when it howls from a low-lying area, then it indicates definitely that a fourth will happen. Also, you could see other animal behaviors such as dove. They cry in a very monotonous manner. Also, there is a mysterious bird. Locally, it is found in Assam. And if you hear those, birds crying in very odd time also, the locals actually, they are aware that there is some kind of heavy rainfall or flood. And even you can see with the behavior of toads and frogs, all of these actually they actually behave in a different manner when there is, a forthcoming any torrential rainfall or devastating flood. Secondly, also early prediction of flood and rain based on the observation of celestial bodies, nature and meteorology. If the moon inclines towards south, there the people, they actually imply forthcoming devastating flood. If the cloud gathers in the southwest direction, it indicates, a probable storm. There could be storm in the southeast direction, indicating rain, flood, and in the northwest, it will indicate a normal rain. Also, there in Assam, there is specific grass, locally known as Torapat, which is belonging to a ginger family. When its new buds come out with tints of silt, it indicates that actually in that area, there could be a potential of devastating flood. And also, when the rainbow extends from northeast to southwest sky, uh, and if it's full, if the moon is full half and it's clearly visible, it also indicates the devastating flood. Massive bamboo flowering, cloud floating from northeast towards southwest. And also, if mango trees bear more flowers than the flowers of jackfruit, even these indicators, they actually show that there will be a chances of flood. And these are indigenous knowledges and practices. These kind of behavior, only those people will be able to observe who have been residing in that particular area, who are aware of the local fauna and flora of that area. So I will also share one experience from my end where, um, yeah, such popular beliefs and practices are acknowledged through entire central tribal belt of India or those places where indigenous communities have been residing. Such knowledge, practice, beliefs, and cultures should be incorporated in policies related to flood management, where the community people are not seen as a just a component exposed to vulnerability, but instead used as a tool to reduce the impact. Combat the challenges and build back better for sustainable solution. So I'll also be sharing one of my examples during my field visit. So the example is based on landslide. So during my field visit, one of the badly affected area, due to landslide, the local staying, in that area told me that the landslide occurred and then it was accompanied by torrential rainfall. And during night, there was no electricity. So they were not able to identify from which direction the landslide, was occurring. But the locals were able to smell the mud of the landslide. And wherever they were able to get the strong, pungent smell of mud, they were actually avoiding to walk, towards that area. And they actually chose to relocate in opposite direction. And the next day, when the sunrise happened and when they could actually see everything, the people there were able to see the area where the strong and pungent smell of mud was coming. The entire area had actually been washed away. And they were able, to save their own lives because of these indigenous knowledges and practices. And such tools, we never see in any policies or guidelines. And this is clearly a gap that has to be filled. And also, much of the literature review needs to be discussed in this area. Next slide, please. Yeah, so thus the community, they should be one of the major stakeholders when risk assessment is being carried out. Disasters are inevitable, unstoppable, and unpredictable. The media portrays disasters as destructive, chaotic, damaging. So only in the upcoming times the prediction of disasters has changed, and we have witnessed the paradigm shift, of response, rescue, and relief centric operations to awareness, sensitization, preparedness, and capacity building approach. A proper path and channelization is required to reduce the risk of disasters. This can be done when emphasis is laid on pre-disaster phase, which includes preparedness, mitigation, and planning in order to minimize the loss, damages, especially to the vulnerable section of society. Some of the factors which play a very important role in defining disasters is prevailing social orders, people notion related to risk and social relation. Disasters are now being coupled with multi-hazard scenario, which can, sorry. Yeah. So now the disasters do not occur, single-handedly, as we all are very much aware that even if there were floods happening or any kind of landslide happening or any kind of earthquake happening, it was always accompanied with pandemic, which is always there. So now the scenario has also become multi-hazard, and the media portrays disasters as destruction, chaotic, and damaging, and the perception of that has also changed over the period of time with the paradigm shift on response, rescue, rescue, relief centric to awareness, sensitization, and capacity building approaches. Next slide, please. So here I will be sharing my experience, understanding, and field exposure with these tribal youths, which are the untapped resources, and what roles these youth play in disaster risk, reduction, and also in climate change scenario. So this was an initiative of PRLF and IIHMR University, coming up with a 6 months program on rural livelihood, where the tribal youth were trained and capacity was done to make the community more resilient, empower them within their own capacities and resources. Thus, the challenges and gaps were addressed through training models and field exposure. Also, these tribal youth, they were at the age between 18 to 30, and they were selected from the central tribal belt of India. For example, from Odisha, they were from Malkangiri, Kalahandi district. From Jharkhand, they were from West Simbhum and Chaibasa. And Chhattisgarh, they were from Bastar district. And from Maharashtra, they were from Nandurbar. These youth, they were traveling into different districts, different states for over a period of 6 months and gaining exposure on those relevant subjects connected with their rural tribal livelihood and capacity. Next slide, please.
Aradhana, I request you to sum up.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you. So in the end, I would like to say that, community plays a very important and vital role in reducing the impact of disaster. People at this level are often the most vulnerable, when any disasters occurs. And but on the other hand, they also experience these, gaps and challenges, and these people actually needs to respond to those challenges by finding valuable solution on themselves rather than giving them or the training on our end also. So instead of keep understanding them as a passive victims, with the knowledge of local geology, the hazard context, and the livelihood option available, local communities must be involved in disaster management programs from the start and supported by the project to develop capacities and linkages, that help them to overcome this catastrophic situation. So I would like to end the presentation here. Thank you once again.
Yeah. Thank you, Aradhana. It's really, the topic you're covering it's really important, and we really appreciate the experience and the ground experience and the case studies you're trying to share with us. But we have very limited time, so that's why I had to intervene. But thank you very much. Now I like to invite Ms. Pragya. Pragya is a youth volunteer based in Rishikesh. She works as a volunteer with the Central Himalayan Environment Association and Appropriate Technology India. Over to you, Pragya. Oh, sorry. I think Pragya is not here. Oh, so maybe we can move ahead, and I will try to connect with her. Let's move ahead. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Arun Verma. Arun Verma is presently working with the Center for Mass Congestion and Transport Related Disaster. He joined NIDM in the year 2019 as a young professional. Prior to this, he has completed his master's degree in disaster management from Department of Geology, Punjab University, Chandigarh. He also holds a post-graduation diploma in environment management. Over to you, Arun.
Thank you, Nitish, for providing me this opportunity to talk in front of all the participants who are distant learner. I, Arun Verma, as Nitish had introducing me nicely, working with National Institute of Disaster Management. Here, the topic which Nitish has assigned me is that role of youth, because we talk about that disaster management is a subject in which we can include lots of people like young mind give a young ideas, which are more important in the field of disaster management as we are talking the multidisciplinary subject in a way. So for this, I am just sharing my screen. Nitish, can you please give me a right, or you have given me?
I mean, you can share your co-host.
Okay. Actually, I don't. Just a second. I think maybe अब हो गया. I think अभी screen दिख रहा है.
हाँ. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Nitish. Thank you so much. Thank you, Spare India, for this opportunity. So, friends, as we are discussing on the flood mitigations measures and the role of youth, so this is a topic that which I was assigned by Nitish and the Spare India, youth leadership and action for disaster risk management or disaster risk reduction, or we can say DRR. So we at a younger age, as we are of above 18 and we can say below the 30 year of, there is a no age bar gap between the youth thing, but youth has given a much more needed things to the disaster management sector. If we talk about the youth, what youth has given, youth has contributed to the majorly on these three sections, in which social section means social society means in this social change means society, where we will talk about the if we encounter with any kind of a disaster, we face people and we face problems like related to the social sectors, like we also say that social vulnerability. What is vulnerability? Vulnerability is kind of a degree of loss to a disaster, and social vulnerability is a kind of thing, if we understand from the example which I'm just putting in front of you, like that if there is any flood situation and we the people, we the youth, we the little children, we the grandparents, we the pregnant women are sitting in a room or any area where the flood has affected, then who are more vulnerable? Who all are vulnerable? More vulnerable is the oldest people, those who are at the age of 60 plus, or maybe have some difficulties in running or walking in here and there. So this is that point of time youth has come out, and youth help the older generation of the people in this during the time of a disaster. If we talk about the technological innovations and inventions, youth has contributed a lot, because कहीं if हम हिंदी में बात करेंगे, यहाँ समझने की कोशिश करें, तो ये इसका सीधा सा मतलब ये है कि यूथ अपना इंटेंशन अच्छी रखते हुए, अपने को लॉजिकली आगे साउंड करते हुए, अंडरस्टैंडिंग करता हुआ चीजों को जब वो इनोवेशंस करता है डिजास्टर के फील्ड में, देन इट विल बी वर्क फॉर अ very good in the sector of innovations. And these technological, जो आजकल टेक्नोलॉजिकल कल्चर आ गया है, टेक्नोलॉजी के साथ में हम इतना ज्यादा बढ़ चुके हैं डिजास्टर के फील्ड में कि उसको मिनिमाइज करना है, कहाँ पे ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम है, वो आजकल GIS मैप्स वगैरह हो गए हैं, बहुत सारी टेक्नोलॉजीज हैं जहाँ पे हम विद इन सडन हमें पता चल जाता है कि यहाँ पे दिक्कत है. आजकल तो वैसे ही कंसेप्ट EOC means like this अपना जो कहते हैं ना emergency operation center. There is a place where in kind of a disaster, at a time of a disaster, EOC has established which has facilities. So what are these facilities? These facilities are like the technological inventions के कारण हम अपने आप को interpret कर पा रहे हैं, अपने आप को चीजें रख पा रहे हैं और हम अपनी problems दूसरों तक पहुंचा पा रहे हैं. And what another thing is that we the youth had contributed to economic growth also. We understand by these things. Coming to the sessions that where youth has contributed or youth एक very nicely play करता है because youth has a brightest mind, young flaps, competitive issues में we the people जो पुराने लोग हैं they have a very vast knowledge. उनके पास बहुत एक कह सकते हैं समझदारी कह लीजिए या नॉलेज कह लीजिए. They have a very good sources. बट उनका यूटिलाइज वो नहीं कर सकते हैं बिकॉज यूथ के पास क्या है एनर्जी है, यूथ के पास क्या है टाइम है, यूथ के पास अब जो बुजुर्ग हैं जिनके पास दोस हु हैज अ साउंड नॉलेज बट क्या है कि दे आर नॉट इन कैपेसिटी कि वो चल के 10 किलोमीटर भाग के उस काम को कर सके. बट वी यूथ हैज दैट पोटेंशियल. We can do in any kind of a disaster, like not only the flood particularly, but we can talk about that this disaster like the earthquake, disaster like tsunami, disaster like cyclones. I have seen in the case of, if you talk about the cyclone in the Odisha, I have seen that in the May 2019, Odisha faced a cyclone that is name is Cyclone Fani, in which youth has contributed a lot. Why lot? Because youth, when the IMD has generated the early warnings to the administration, youth alerted and youth also helped to the gap which the older population and the younger population had, because younger population learn from these theoretical knowledges or the universities or the webinars, seminars, and many more things. There are different sources from use and that time is we can say practical knowledge. Theoretical knowledge को practical में बदलने का समय था, तो then they have showed a good result. So we have a very good forces, and we also know कि country में not only in our country but rest of the world में youth का एक बहुत ही एक regime और we can say कि एक level बढ़ता बढ़ता धीरे धीरे हम एक ऐसे level तक पहुंच गए जहाँ पे our own potential is that we should introduce youth to a disaster management. For that, we at NITM has generated a university network. Why this university network is helpful? Because if we trained youth in a disaster management since they are 10th class or 12th class and in the other upper classes like graduation and post graduations, so they can understand the things at a very prior ages, then they can implement these theoretical knowledge to any practical scenarios once they encounter any disaster. Impact, we also impacted with the youth has also been impacted by any disaster, because we know when there is a disaster that it is said that you are a younger people, you please help the victims. उस victims की help करने समय में क्या होता है कि we can also face any difficulty, like we can also hurted, we can also be injured. So these type of issues may be encountered by a youth also. And disaster not only see कि वो बुजुर्ग है तो उसके ऊपर ज्यादा आएगा या जवान है तो उसके ऊपर नहीं आएगा, ऐसा नहीं है. डिजास्टर तो कोई सिनेरियो नहीं, कुछ उसे पता है कुछ नहीं पता है, बट यूथ भी इफेक्ट होता है, यूथ के ऊपर भी इम्पैक्ट पड़ता है इन डिजास्टर्स का, नॉट ओनली फॉर द ओल्डर पीपल. बट इफ यूथ के ऊपर ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट हो जाता है तो देन क्या प्रॉब्लम अराइज हो जाती है कि इफ आवर यूथ इज इफेक्टेड, देन we will go for the another certain, like the vehicle called for the NDRF, we will call for another thing, because youth is utilized like first responder to any disaster like tsunami, earthquake, or any natural hazards, or we can say any human induced disasters. And children, young people are they are easy to mitigate from one place to another place in any disaster, because they are at a young ages, they have a small emotional attachment to a place rather than older people. So उनको ये समझाना भी बहुत आसान है कि भाई ये तेरे लिए गलत है, तो यहाँ से अगर हम आज माइग्रेट कर लेते हैं तो कल को प्रॉब्लम नहीं आएगी. बट क्या कि दिस थिंग understandable to the older people, उनको समझाना, that is a very big challenge for the youth also and for the administrations also. So this is the thing. we at our national, we have a different policies, and which like that national youth policy define youth as a person those who has a age between 15 to 29 years के बीच में जो age है हमारी, वो इसको youth कहते हैं. और according to the census of 2001, 27% of youth population हमारे देश में करीबन 27.5% जो population थी youth की थी, and approximately 34.7% of Indian gross जो national income है, gross per capita income बोलते हैं, वो youth generate करता है. तो this is an Indian scenario, because as we are talking about the Indian scenario only, and these are the initiatives which at a national level or at a we can say कि हमारा country एक यूथ को ट्रेन करने के लिए इस तरह के प्रोग्राम चला रहा है कि जैसे आपदा मित्रा स्कीम लॉन्च बाय एनडीएमए. What is the major purpose of this? Because the major aim of this NDMA scheme is that we should train the youth, because हमारे youth trained हो जाएगा so they can easily handle a disaster, they can easily respond as a first responder during a disaster. Another scheme is that Nehru Yuva Kendra Sangathan to prepare disaster response teams. Disaster response team, because we have seen that during disaster, during an emergency, हमारे पास कोई भी एक ऐसा नहीं है कि एकदम से कोई मदद आ जाती है. We required some time, because any disaster needs इसका अपना एक समय होता है कि उस समय में आपको रिस्पॉन्ड करना है. ऐसा नहीं है कि हम एकदम से रिस्पॉन्स करेंगे, अभी डिजास्टर आया विद इन सडनली आपको कोई हलवा सा मिल जाएगा कि भाई ये आ गए लोग आ गए, इस तरह से नहीं होता है. तो डिजास्टर का है समय होता है. तो अगर हमारे खुद के बीच के लोग, हमारे बीच के बच्चे, यंग जनरेशन के जो लड़के हैं लड़कियां हैं, वो अगर ट्रेंड हैं, तो ये जिम्मा एनडीआरएफ ने उठाया इनको ट्रेंड करने का. And youth, you should involve in civil defense also. Civil defense में youth का एक बहुत ही बड़ा रोल है, because आजकल दिल्ली में मैंने देखा, दिल्ली like metropolitan cities like Delhi, we have seen that they civil defense people are being engaged totally with the age of 30 years. उनको 30 साल तक के जो बच्चे हैं उनको engage किया जा रहा है civil defense में for different purposes. Maybe for a contractual or permanent it is a secondary matter, but they are trained. Not only field of disaster management, but disaster, they are trained, they are getting some trainings, because youth है, जब वो training लेगा तो कुछ ना कुछ अच्छा सीखेगा, and it can be helpful for the older people or the other organizations also. Last fourth point, I am already mentioned you that Indian University Institution Network for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is an initiative by National Institute of Disaster Management, my institute. The main purpose of that institute, that point is that we should enroll all the universities which are coming under the umbrella of a disaster management, those who offer a certificate course, those who offer a master's course, those who offer any diploma course in disaster management. They should come together and work in the field of disaster risk reductions. And engagement of young researchers, engagement of young professionals, engagement of young students is much needed thing in the disaster management. There are some frameworks like we have encountered the Sendai framework, which also talks about that we should recognize the work of a youth in the disaster management. Because if we get a recognition, if we get something from the government, if we get something from the organization, we the youth will feel happy. और जब हम happy होंगे तो we should, हमारा जो mind का setup होता है, we at this stage we understand कि हमें अगर कोई recognize कर रहा है तो इसका मतलब we are doing something special or we are doing something good. जब हम कुछ अच्छा सोचते हैं और अच्छा करने की उम्मीद रखते हैं, that will enhance our capacities. हमारे अंदर का जो enthusiasm है वो और generate होता है और जागरूक होता है कि भाई और मैं कुछ सीखूं. That will be very beneficial for the disaster management also. And we have a policy, that National Youth Policy 2014 कि भाई disaster response को इंस्ट्रूलाइजेशन कर देना चाहिए. इसको एक ऐसा लेवल पे लेके जाएं जहां के कि हमें लोगों को enthusiasm generate हो. Young people जो हैं अपने सोसाइटी में एक वी कैन से एक आइडल एग्जांपल बन के निकले कि दैट भाई उस बच्चे ने इतना अच्छा काम किया उस डिजास्टर में. ऐसा हो भी रहा है कंट्री में कि नॉट ओनली वी आर जस्ट टॉकिंग, कुछ ऐसी प्लेसेस हैं जहां पे कुछ यूथ बच्चों ने अपना एक कैलिबर दिखाया है कि डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट में. आई विल जस्ट गिव अ ब्रीफ अबाउट 2-3 प्रेजेंटेशंस की स्लाइड्स के बाद आई विल गिव अ केस स्टडीज ऑफ 2 ऑफ माइन ओनली और माय ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस. This is the role of youth in disaster risk reduction. We all know what is Sendai framework. Sendai framework focuses on the disaster management from 2015 to 30. We have some goals, we have some priorities. Like these are the 4 priorities in which we are working in the Sendai framework up to 2015 to 2030. Understanding disaster risk, strengthening disaster risk governance, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, and enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response. These are the 4 points where we can और we have और हमने ये करा भी है. डिजास्टर को अंडरस्टैंड करना है, यूथ को समझाना बहुत जरूरी है कि ये डिजास्टर है, इसमें ये एक समस्या फील आती है, ये है. अगर बच्चा या यंग जो जनरेशन है जो अभी एक ऐसी एज में है जब वो समझ सकता है कि ये डिजास्टर है. सपोज करो हम एक एग्जांपल लेके चलते हैं कि अगर हम बच्चे को ये बताएं कि भाई ये दारू पीना खराब है या दारू लिमिट में पीना ठीक होता है, तो वो क्या है कि उसके माइंडसेट में कंसेप्ट क्लियर होता है. तो वही डिजास्टर के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हमें करना है. हमें उसे ये बताना है कि बेटा अगर तूफान आ रहा है तो किस तरह से आप यू हैव टू सेव योरसेल्फ. अगर अर्थक्वेक आता है तो हाउ वी कैन रिस्पॉन्ड, तो किस तरह से टेबल के नीचे छुपना है. तो एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग बनेगी उसकी, जब वो धीरे धीरे अपनी एज में धीरे धीरे बड़ा होगा, देन इट विल बेनिफिशियल फॉर हिम. स्ट्रेंथनिंग डिजास्टर रिस्क गवर्नेंस, हमें डिजास्टर का गवर्नेंस है उसको भी मजबूत करना है हमारे लिए. उसके लिए तो ये भी एक सेकंड प्रायोरिटीज है हमारे सेंडाई फ्रेमवर्क की. इन्वेस्टिंग इन डिजास्टर रिस्क रिडक्शन, रिजिलियंस के ऊपर हमें काम करना है कि जो भी बिल्डिंग बन रही है उनको ध्यान में रखते हुए बनाना है कि जोनेशन वाइज बन रही है नहीं बन रही है. वी शुड लुक आफ्टर दैट. क्या वर्नेबिलिटीज हो सकती हैं कि कहीं भी हम जा रहे हैं, डीएम प्लान बना रहे हैं किसी भी चीज का, डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट प्लान, तो हमें ये देखना पड़ेगा व्हाट आर द पॉसिबिलिटीज ऑफ डिजास्टर, कहाँ पे कौन सी पॉसिबिलिटी है. बिकॉज अगर हम यूथ एज अ लीडर काम करेंगे, यूथ एज अ लीडर वी विल ट्रेन और वी शुड प्रोसीड, देन वी कैन अंडरस्टैंड कि क्या हमें प्रॉब्लम थी और क्या हम अब इंक्रीज कर सकते हैं. बिकॉज वी शुड आल्सो अंडरस्टैंड द लेकोनास फ्रॉम लेसन लर्न्स व्हिच वी हैव डन, व्हिच वर्क वी हैव डन इन अ पास्ट. जब हम पास्ट की एक्टिविटीज से हम अंडरस्टैंड करेंगे कि दिक्कत हो रही है, देन इट विल बी गुड. एंड एनहांस डिजास्टर प्रिपेयर्डनेस फॉर इफेक्टिव रिस्पॉन्स एंड बिल्डिंग बेटर. हमें कैपेसिटीज को बढ़ाना है. वी शुड ट्रेन एंड वी शुड इंक्रीज द इफेक्टिवनेस ऑन द रिस्पॉन्स पार्ट ऑल्सो. If we talk about, I am giving case studies of these things. This is a one Gujar community where leadership emerges. कि हमारा जो leadership youth का है वो किस तरह से enhance होता है या किस तरह से काम करता है. मैं एक example के तौर पे बता रहा हूँ. ये case study मेरी खुद की करी हुई है. One Gujar community है एक उत्तराखंड में. These communities are coming from the अगर हम ancient time से बात करें, आज से 200 साल 300 साल पुरानी बात करें, तो ये कश्मीर की एक कम्युनिटी है जो नोमैडिक हर्डर्स है, जिनके जानवर होते हैं वो इधर उधर जाते हैं अपने पालने के लिए या फिर उनको चारे वगैरह के लिए. तो दे इफेक्टेड ड्यूरिंग डिफरेंट डिजास्टर्स से इफेक्ट हुए. उनकी जो अपना मेन लैंड था उत्तराखंड में, जब वो बसे वहां पे उत्तराखंड, तो द फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट हैज टेकन आउट. उन्होंने वहां से उनका जमीन है वो सरकार ने कह दिया, फॉरेस्ट ने कह दिया कि दिस इज नॉट राइट वे टू एंटर, आप लोग यहाँ से निकले, ये सरकार की जमीन है, ये पूरा फॉरेस्ट लैंड है. तो व्हाट we as a youth, we have a team of 5 to people with me and with my organizations and all. So what role youth can play? We have understand the problems that what they are facing into their livelihood. Because अगर हम as a younger generation हम उस पे काम कर सकते हैं. We have travel alerts. हम 20 बच्चों के 20-22 जवान लड़के या 20-22 यू कैन से यूथ एज अ पावर, हमने एकजुट होकर काम करना चालू किया. उनकी लिवलीहुड स्ट्रक्चर देखा कि वो किस पे जिंदा है. तो दे आर टोटली डिपेंडेंट ऑन दिस एग्रीकल्चर प्रोडक्ट्स. मे बी अ माइनर सब्जी हो गई और ये कुछ थोड़े बहुत फ्रूट्स हो गए, उन पे ही टोटली उनकी लिवलीहुड चलती है. बाकी अदर द सोर्स ऑफ लिवलीहुड इज देयर मिल्क वो पीते हैं, मिल्क वो थोड़ा बहुत बेच देते हैं, तो वो है. तो हमने वहां से उनके बच्चे ना तो पढ़ पा रहे हैं ना समझ पा रहे हैं, और वहां पे एक लैंग्वेज बैरियर भी बन चुका है, क्योंकि दे आर फ्रॉम द माइग्रेटेड फ्रॉम द कश्मीर एंड दे जस्ट गो टू थ्रू आउट द उत्तराखंड पार्ट्स एंड दे स्पीक डिफरेंट लैंग्वेजेस एंड इन उत्तराखंड दे स्पीक डिफरेंट. सो एक लैंग्वेज बैरियर भी बन गया था. एंड फूड एंड शेल्टर्स के लिए उनको बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रही थी, फूड नहीं मिल रहा था. एंड like situation like the 2013 में flood आया था, तो many people from this community is also affected, which are not under any records of the government organizations. So what we do, we focusedly work on that, and we as a youth will work for the disaster risk, because as we the organization are working the disaster management, so we look after the perspectives of a disaster management, that how can we help them in case of a disaster management. Like they have encountered a flood, they have encountered earthquake, they have encountered landslides, many more times they have encountered flood situation, mud flood, and many more things. So what we do, we wrote to the letters to different organizations, we wrote to the letter to the different forest officers, And ultimately, what happened, the forest department agrees that these are the mistakes which forest department had made. So their land should be returned back to them, and they can construct their houses. And this whole process will require approximately 4 to 5 years. What we are doing from last 5 years, or we can say 4 years. Now they are in a situation that they can construct their houses on their land. They are in a position they can rehabilitate from one place to another places. They can ripen, or we can say वो अपना crop लगा सकते हैं अपने ही land में, जो कि forest department ने उनसे ले लिया था. तो what we as a youth, because अगर हम leader की तरह काम नहीं करते वहाँ, if we don't work for them in the case of disaster, not only for the case of disaster management, rehabilitation एक बहुत बड़ा issue है, reconstruction एक issue है disaster management का. अगर लोगों के घर टूट जाए तो मिलेंगे ही नहीं. तो वी एज ए यूथ हैज अ पोटेंशियल, हमारे पास पावर है, हम 10 किलोमीटर भी पैदल चल सकते हैं, 20 भी चल सकते हैं, अगर किसी का कुछ अच्छा काम हो रहा है. दैट इज अ पॉइंट वी शुड अंडरस्टैंड एट दिस एंड. एंड अनदर थिंग इज दैट इफ वी आर जस्ट आई एम कंक्लूडिंग 1 second, 1 minute, I am concluding, Nitish. This is the another thing that we have developed a national plan, disaster management plan of NIDM. We as a younger people see what is the vulnerabilities, what are the disasters which can encounter in the area of National Institute of Disaster Management. These are the things youth is making plan for whom? For youth. And involvement of youth is also increasing, and for the safety of youth also. So youth is major factor which is very important. So friends, take it easy that we should involve youth in the disaster management field, and we should work on that. In the last, I will say, youth is not a, हमारे यहाँ यूथ एक ऐसा ही नहीं है कि भाई नौकरी करना है. अगर हम उसे एक अच्छे प्रोडक्ट बनाना चाहते हैं तो उसे समझाएं चीजों को कि भाई these are the things, and youth can make tremendous changes in the society, in not only the field of disaster management but all the sectors. Thank you, Nitish, for providing me this opportunity.
Thank you, Arun. And in the last, I'd like to invite again Ms. Pragya. Pragya is a youth volunteer based in Rishikesh, Uttarakhand. Over to you, Pragya.
Hi, hello everyone. So I'm Pragya from Rishikesh, Uttarakhand. Thank you, Nitish, for this opportunity. Okay. So my first experience with flood was when I was in class 11th, and there was a flash flood in Uttarakhand due to cloud burst. And at that time, first memory I had of flood was when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. Okay, so suddenly some uncle came to our home. They was like, "Chalo, chalo, ghar khali karo. You have to move because there is a chance of flood." That was my first encounter. But after that, there was no such big issue. And then later, when the Kedarnath disaster happened, that was my major encounter with flood. So before engaging youth in flood risk management and other things, I think it's more important that you point out to the youth, and more than pointing out, the youth should understand like what's the major causes, which are what are the major causes of flood. So what I'll be talking about is like why the flash floods are occurring more and more in Uttarakhand. Okay, so I'll be sharing like scenario of my place, because even after so many big disaster and cloudburst and flash floods, I don't think the youth of my state, or very specifically of Shivalik range, is not understanding the scenario. So if I'll take the current scenario of the Char Dham Yatra, if you will see the news, so there is too much footfall in Kedarnath and the other region of Uttarakhand. Okay, and when we say youth, so this youth will be our future trekkers or the adventurous guys who will come for their treks and enjoyment in Uttarakhand from all over the India, or maybe from all over the world. So I think this one thing should be addressed. This upper Shivalik terrain, or we can say the Himalayan range, is very fragile, and its carrying capacity is very low. Even after knowing all these things, and I have talked to too many people who come here for trek or any adventurous activity, they understand these things, but no matter how much they understand it, they are not ready to accept it, and they will come like in big groups, even after knowing that our carrying capacity is very low. So I think before engaging youth in flood risk management or any kind of thing, we should teach them like this ecological sensitivity, or like that every terrain is different and they should respect their ecology, and accordingly they should go to that place. Like in last few years, we had too many flash floods and other disasters in Uttarakhand. It's just because too much footfalls, okay? I mean, every year, so many trekkers come to our place, and they do, some of them do very stupid kind of activity, you know? Like if you check online, there's a video of few people, they literally, so there was a pond, which we call Tals, in upper range when you go. So this there was a big boulder there. I don't know what they were trying to show, कि मैंने कितना gym किया or what. They simply pulled that boulder and उसको उस pond में डाल दिया. And see, when it comes to him, I don't know about the other terrain, but when it comes to Himalayan range, आप हमारे यहाँ एक पत्थर हिलाइए, maybe like whole hill will fall down and there will be a like बहुत बड़ा landslide, but nobody care about that, okay? Like when they sit in a posh cafe or somewhere else, they talk about, oh, this is very sensitive area, so this happened, that happened, aap kaise reh lete ho, this and that. But again, when you're coming to my place or like any other place, like any hilly area, okay, whether it's Himachal and Seven Sisters or my place, they're not respecting that thing. So leave the engagement. The first thing I think what we should teach our youth is to respect ecology. And if you're going somewhere, आप देखो कि वहाँ पर कैसा system है and what kind of place that is, how fragile that place is. Understand that and then only go. Okay. Second thing is, so second thing which I want to point out. That our youth should know like what kind of development is happening in their places. So in 2000, 9th of November 2000, we got separated from UP, okay? Uttarakhand bana tha, and जब हमारा UP से separation हुआ था, our road was only 8,000 kilometers, right? And in last 22 years, हमारा जो road का length है in Uttarakhand, that is 45,000 kilometers. And our dumping zone of those road is rivers. So वो सारा कचरा and mud, whatever comes out when they are making road, that they dump all that thing in river, and the density increase, and then in the monsoon there is a flash flood in Uttarakhand, and also the hydro projects and everything. So even the people who are of like in their early 50s and 60s, they go there and they do all that dharna and all, ki ye mat karo, our ecology is getting affected, blah blah. So nobody listen to them. But I think when youth go there and like up and you talk to them, that's a totally different scenario. I mean, it's easy, you know, when the old people are sitting on dharna and people will scold them, and they don't have that much capacity that they'll sit whole day there with their BP and sugar ki dawai. So I think it's our responsibility to understand what kind of development is happening in our places. Is it sustainable or not sustainable, and what ecological effect is giving us? So at the end of the day, I mean, it's for us, okay? People of my grandfather's age, or maybe of my father's age, will live for next 20 or 30 years, and then they will die. What our politician or any leader told us is this development is for you, but on what cost? That's what we have to look. And I think that is the most important thing where we should engage our youth, because if once they understand what is the ecology, how sensitive their area is, and what kind of engagement is happening in their places, whether it's this kind of engagement, road, hydro projects, and this tourism development. Once they understand whether it's sustainable or not, it's like eco-friendly or not, how it's affecting their ecology. I mean, half of the flood issue will be gone there, because once you understand it's not sustainable and what cost you're paying for that, obviously you will become more aware of that. And yeah, once you understand it, I think half of the work is done. So before engaging our youth in risk management or any other thing, I think it's more important that we tell them what kind of development they require in their area, and what is the ecology of their area, how sensitive their area is, and what is the carrying capacity. Basically, like, introduce them to the ecology and environment of their area. And once they understand that, half of the work is done. And then I think whatever decision they will take, either for development or for any other kind of engagement, that will be eco-friendly and like good for future of the area, and like future of the area, and it will reduce future disasters and flash floods. Okay. Yeah, this much I have to say, because I think these are the main points which I experienced, and like whatever my field experience was, or whatever I experienced, and like past 8-9 years, since I'm working with different organizations, this is what I observed, and this is what I felt is most required. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pratya. And we are sorry, we are running running out of time. But before
no,
we end,
I already gave you bullet points. So
no problem. Before
Thank
we
you.
end session, if one or two participants wants to ask questions, we can take maximum 1 or 2 questions, not more than that. So please, if you have question, raise your hand or put it in the chat box.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
May I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
हाँ सर, मैं एक ये जानना चाहता हूँ, आजकल दिल्ली के अंदर 5-5 फ्लोर की बिल्डिंग्स बन रही हैं, लेकिन इसमें डिजास्टर के लिए कोई भी ऑप्शन नहीं रखा जाता कि अगर कल को कोई आग लग जाती है तो उसको कैसे हम सरवाइव कर पाएंगे, कैसे उन लोगों को निकाल पाएंगे, तो उनको एनओसी कहाँ से मिल जाती है? ये चीज समझ से बाहर है.
I think Arun will be the best person to answer your question.
Ashok sir, this is a very big issue which you has raised in that Delhi में क्या 5-5 क्या 20-20 फुट मंजिली बिल्डिंग बन जा रही हैं, and that create a very huge damage to not only for the property but also for the human loss, as we have seen. कुछ महीने आई थिंक साल पहले एक पूरी बिल्डिंग एक नाले में भी बह गई थी. वो भी क्या था कि मल्टी फ्लोर बिल्डिंग बनी हुई थी जिसमें काफी लोगों को नुकसान हुआ. बट आई थिंक इसका मैं ये नहीं कह सकता हूँ कहाँ से ये लोग एनओसी वगैरह ले रहे हैं, बट इट इज अ रॉन्ग प्रैक्टिस जिसको हमें टाइम रहते समझाना भी चाहिए लोगों को, और कोशिश करनी चाहिए कि इसको मिनिमाइज क्योंकि दिल्ली एक ऐसा सिटी है, एक ऐसा शहर है जहाँ पे वैसे ही ऑलरेडी इतना ओवर कंस्ट्रक्शन और ओवर कंजेस्टेड प्लेसेस है, जहाँ पे कि एक माइनर इंसिडेंट भी हो जाता है तो भी दिक्कत हो जाती है. पिछले महीने ही कुछ महीने पहले देखा गया एक क्वेश्चन, एक जगह की एक आग लग गई थी, तो आग तो लग गई है, उससे इतना नुकसान नहीं हुआ जितना ये कि वो ना तो कोई फायर वाला पहुंच पाया आदमी, ना कोई कुछ पहुंच पा रहा है, क्योंकि इतना कंजेस्टेड बना दिया है कि ना कुछ रिसोर्सेस पहुंच ही नहीं पा रहे हैं. तो उससे ज्यादा नुकसान हुआ कि जबकि बकायदा अगर वी हैव प्रॉपर रिसोर्सेज और उनका प्रॉपर चैनल होता जाने का, तो क्या वी शुड हैव. इसी वजह से आजकल मोटरसाइकिल जो फायर ब्रिगेड के हैं उनको भी थोड़ा प्रमोट किया जा रहा है कि वो भी एक एक्सेसिबल हो सके कि हर कॉलोनी या हर गली में जा सके. आपका पॉइंट बहुत वैलिड है सर कि ये लोग पता नहीं कहाँ से आरसी कहाँ से लाइसेंस ले आते हैं कि कंस्ट्रक्शन इस तरह से पुअर मैनेजमेंट कंस्ट्रक्शन कह सकते हैं, जिसको कि चाहिए प्रशासन को देखना. प्रशासन की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी बनती है कि उनको देखें कि वो किस तरह का कंस्ट्रक्शन कर रहे हैं, क्या फिर जो कंस्ट्रक्शन कर रहे हैं वो अप्रूव्ड है नहीं है, या फिर उस इलाके में कितना अप्रूव्ड कंस्ट्रक्शन है। जैसे कि म्युनिसिपैलिटीज और अच्छी बड़ी तकड़ी कॉलोनियों में देखा जाता है कि लोग एक लिमिट तक ही फ्लोर बना सकते हैं, ऐसा नहीं है कि उसके ऊपर फर्दर एक्सटेंड कर सकें।
Thank you, sir.
अभी तो नहीं है सर, वो तो मे बी आई थिंक डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के पास होगा, उनके पास जरूर प्लान होगा। एक बार डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन से बात करी जा सकती है कि किस तरह का कार्य है जो चल रहा है, इसको कैसे मिनिमाइज किया जा सकता है।
Thank you, Arun. I will ask just one more question. Anybody wants to ask? It will be like, really appreciate if you ask a question related to today's topic or what our speakers discuss. If anybody has
there is one question that what opportunities have been after completed disaster management from MBA.
We will take it later. We will get back to them later.
Yeah, we can write in the chat box also. If somebody has a question related to today's talk, then it is very benefit.
Yeah. Or should we end today's session? Yeah. Okay. There's no question. So before I officially invite Mr. Altmas to give a vote of thanks. I really want to thank all the speakers and participants. And we are really sorry also because we oversee the time. Usually we don't like to take more of your time. So now I like to invite Mr. Altmas to propose a official vote of thanks.
Thank you, Nitesh, and thank you everyone. A wonderful session on engagement of youth in flood risk management. I think very important and lots of takeaways for us from this session today. Sincere thanks to all the 5 panelists, Ms. Kusum, Mr. Andrews, Ms. Aradhana, Ms. Pragya, and Mr. Arun. I mean, all of you deliberated quite importantly on this very crucial topic. I think we met at a very right time. The monsoon is quite near and it's knocking at the door. Only the last day that we saw in Delhi what happened due to the strong winds and hailstorms. So I think it's very important to talk and discuss this important issue just before the monsoon. And when we are talking about youth, I think we cannot miss. We cannot miss to mention about one of the greatest activists, Greta Thunberg. In fact, she's just a youth and Swedish environmentalist who is known for challenging world leaders to take immediate action for climate change mitigation. She could be the prime example and inspiration for all the stakeholders of disaster risk management, in fact. So thank you again to all our panelists, and you rightly highlighted and echoed on the very important issue related to them during your talk today. And I cannot miss to thank all our esteemed audience and participants who have joined us from different organizations, academic backgrounds, and from different geographies. I'm glad to see one of my professors from my former university joining us today, Mr. Lubna Siddiqui ma'am. And I am also very happy to see Mr. Ashok Dhingraji from Delhi Civil Defense, who is a regular participant to many of our sessions and webinars. So thank you all of you. And this webinar couldn't have been possible without the hard work of our colleague Nitish Barole. I mean, he single-handedly made this possible. So thank you, Nitish, and thank you to our colleagues also, Ms. Mansi and Afrin from Sphere India. And now we can conclude this session. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Altmas. Before I end the session, I also want to tell you about the SPS initiative. We are going to have more engagement with young people in the coming months. A lot of more this type of webinars, consultation, offline, online, and the capacity building programs as well. So we are hoping you can join us in the future programs as well. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. And in fact, I must mention here that Nitish is and we at Sphere India will be very soon initiating, making a guidelines on youth engagement in DRR also. So hopefully we'll be needing your support and discussions, such deliberations in future also. So thank you again, all of you, and see you soon.